Let's cautiously enter room 217 together as we tackle Stephen King's The Shining, a book that many readers consider to be his magnum opus. Published in 1977, The Shining was King's third novel and his first major hardcover bestseller. And this cemented his status as the king of horror and setting the stage for decades of literary dominance. This novel is a pivotal piece of King's legacy and remains one of the most influential horror novels of all time. It's a story that propelled him from promising writer to household name, and proving that horror could be both commercially successful and critically acclaimed. For those who may not be familiar, The Shining tells the haunting tale of Jack Torrance, an aspiring writer and recovering alcoholic who takes a job as the winter caretaker of the Overlook Hotel, a remote and historic lodge nestled in the mountains of Colorado. He moves in with his wife Wendy and their young son Danny, who possesses a psychic ability known as The Shining. What starts as a hopeful new chapter for Jack and his family, it soon spirals into a nightmarish descent as the hotel reveals its dark, supernatural nature. The Shining isn't just a ghost story. It's a story of addiction, familial trauma, and the fragility of the human mind. King uses Jack's struggles with alcoholism and the specter of his own abusive past to explore how personal demons can be just as haunting as any supernatural force. These themes are woven seamlessly into the narrative, making the horror feel all too real and all too relatable. And we can't talk about The Shining without acknowledging its iconic status in popular culture, largely thanks to Kubrick's 1980 film adaptation. This movie, with its unforgettable imagery and Jack Nicholson's chilling portrayal of Jack Torrance, has become ingrained in the collective consciousness. But while Kubrick's film is undeniably influential, it has sparked endless debate among King fans and critics for its significant deviations from the source material. It's a topic worth discussing because it raises the question, can an adaptation succeed as its own entity while diverging from the heart of the book? So let's dig into The Shining, what makes it a masterpiece that it is, how King's personal experiences seep into the story, and why this book in particular continues to hold its place as one of the finest works in horror literature. So buckle up, because this journey into the Overlook Hotel is a wild one. But first, if this is your first time here, welcome to Mysterious Galaxies, where I review and discuss science fiction, fantasy, and horror novels. While I won't delve into every plot detail, because let's face it, The Shining is so ingrained in our cultural psyche that most people know the basics, even if they haven't read it. There are some key elements worth revisiting to appreciate why this book is considered a masterpiece. At its core, The Shining is the story of Jack Torrance, an aspiring writer and recovering alcoholic who accepts a job as the winter caretaker of the isolated Overlook Hotel. He brings his wife Wendy and their young son Danny to live there, believing it will be a fresh start and a chance for him to focus on his writing and rebuild his strained family relationships. However, Danny isn't an ordinary child. He possesses an extraordinary psychic ability called the Shining, and this ability allows him to sense the hotel's dark, malevolent presence and the dangers lurking within. The Overlook, far from being just an old building, is a character in its own right. It's a malevolent, almost sentient force that manipulates those within its walls, and it preys on their vulnerabilities and amplifies their worst impulses. What sets The Shining apart from typical haunted house stories is its focus on the psychological horror and deeply human struggles. Jack's battle with alcoholism is more than just background detail. It's central to his character and the story's themes. King portrays Jack as a man who carries the scars of his own abusive childhood, battling with generational trauma and the pressure of breaking that cycle while grappling with his own shortcomings. The Overlook seizes on Jack's weaknesses, using his fragile mental state and addiction as a foothold to drive him further into madness. The book structure is another standout element. King masterfully shifts between the perspective of Jack, Danny, And even the Overlook itself, creating a layered narrative that reveals the hotel's history and its sinister nature. Through interactions with characters like the hotel manager, Stuart Ullman, the groundskeeper Watson, and Danny's psychic mentor Dick Halloran, we learn about the tragic and violent events that have stained the Overlook's past. One of the most significant revelations comes from the scrapbook Jack finds in the basement, a likely ploy by the hotel itself to deepen its grip on him. This scrapbook, filled with newspaper clippings and records of the hotel's dark history, showcases King's skill at embedding exposition through creative means, a technique he has been refining since Carrie and Salem's Lot. Even though The Shining is populated by a few side characters, it feels like an intimate, small-scale story. The true focus is on the Torrance family and their claustrophobic struggle for survival. This tight lens gives readers a front-row seat to Jack's gradual unraveling, Wendy's increasing desperation, and Danny's haunting visions. King's ability to make the hotel itself a living entity, watchful, manipulative, and hungry, adds another layer of dread that permeates every scene. The story's power lies in its pacing and how it builds tension, from Jack's initial optimism to the gradual cracks in his composure. The descent into madness is paced with meticulous care. Each chapter pulls the reader deeper into the chilling realization that Jack isn't simply possessed or victimized, he's exposed. The Overlook doesn't create the darkness within Jack, it reveals what was already there. It's a subtle but powerful distinction that redefines how we view him as a character and why King's portrayal is so striking. This novel isn't just about ghosts and eerie hallways, it's about the monsters within all of us. The Overlook becomes a crucible that tests the Torrance's bonds and resilience, making The Shining a haunting tale that goes beyond supernatural horror to probe the fears we carry inside. I'll get the frequent criticism out of the way first, because I've already discussed a bit of what made me love the story. This is going to be a touchy subject, so just bear with me. I've read a few reviews of The Shining that touch on the racism within the book, specifically in regards to Dick Halloran, the hotel's black chef and one of the few characters who understands Danny's psychic abilities. Halloran is a pivotal figure in the story. He serves as both a mentor to Danny and a beacon of hope and kindness amidst the novel's dark chaos. Some readers may find it uncomfortable and jarring, but that's precisely the point of it. Throughout the book, Halloran faces overt and subtle instances of racism that serve as a reminder of the prejudices ingrained in society. These moments are heightened as Halloran gets closer to the Overlook for the same reason that Danny sees horrible dead people and Jack is presented with alcohol. It's to goad the character into submission, violence, or even death. For contemporary readers, this portrayal is likely going to feel dated and uncomfortable, especially when considering that Halloran is one of the only black characters in the story. His experiences with racism don't significantly drive the plot forward, so it makes it easy to question whether these depictions add meaningful depth or simply reinforce harmful stereotypes. In this way, the handling of race in The Shining feels like an area where the novel shows its age, and it reminds readers that cultural attitudes and awareness have shifted significantly since the 1970s. That said, it's also important to approach these moments with an understanding of the context in which King was writing. And he's very much a writer of his time, and his books reflect that, especially his earlier ones. You simply have to take a look at any number of his children or teenage characters, and even his more modern novels. They all speak and make cultural references to things in the 50s or 60s, years and years before they were even born, because that's what King knows. Racism, even in the mid-20th century, was a pervasive and accepted part of life, and authors often included it as a reflection on societal norms. In The Shining, it serves as a reminder of the ugliest bits of humanity a person can face. Now, with that said, I understand the discomfort surrounding these scenes. I hope that it doesn't deter readers from enjoying this masterpiece for its exploration of human flaws, psychological terror, and supernatural suspense. But let's get back to the things I love about The Shining, because there are so much to go around. Starting with the characters, and maybe it's because I've known several alcoholics, both friends and family, but Jack was such a sympathetic character. His selfishness, stubbornness, and lack of responsibility is deep-rooted, and you can't help but feel for the man as you learn his story. And this is what makes The Shining so compelling. It's an exploration of human frailty and the ease with which one can be consumed by darkness. The Overlook doesn't create the monster in Jack. It reveals what was already there, hidden beneath the surface. This complexity is mirrored in King's prose, which is both sharp and precise. Unlike some of King's later works that can veer into sprawling, multi-threaded epics, The Shining remains tight and focused. Every word and every scene serves a purpose, driving the story forward without unnecessary detours. For those who enjoy horror that keeps a close, intimate focus on character and setting, this novel is a masterclass. It shows that true terror doesn't always come from outside forces, it often comes from within. And while some readers may prefer King's more epic, wide-ranging narratives, The Shining excels in its confined, almost claustrophobic scope. It's a story that makes you feel trapped alongside the characters, suffocating under the weight of their fears and the hotel's oppressive influence. For fans of tightly woven psychological horror with a touch of the supernatural, it does not get better than this. If you're a fan of psychological horror, character-driven narratives, or simply love Stephen King's ability to weave human experiences with supernatural dread, The Shining should be at the top of your reading list. This book isn't just a pillar of King's extensive bibliography, it's a testament to his ability to dig deep into the human psyche and reflect our darkest fears back at us. What makes The Shining a must-read isn't just its spine-chilling moments or its ghostly apparitions, it's how it delves into the vulnerability, flaws, and struggles of his characters, making them feel unsettlingly real. Jack Torrance is more than just an antagonist or a man possessed by supernatural forces. He's the embodiment of inner demons that many people face. King's exploration of Jack's addiction, his simmering rage, and his desperate need for redemption strikes a chord that resonates far beyond the confines of the horror genre. The story is just as much about confronting personal failures and inherited trauma as it is about a haunted hotel. Jack's descent is relatable because it taps into fears that are all too human. The fear of repeating the mistakes of our parents, the fear of losing control, and the fear of failure. It's not just Jack's journey that makes this story compelling. Danny Torrance, with his unique psychic abilities, is both a symbol of innocence and resilience. His perspective adds an emotional depth to the story that heightens the tension. King masterfully portrays the bond between Danny and Wendy, highlighting a mother's protective instincts and the child's perceptiveness. Wendy too shines as a character who embodies quiet strength and determination, balancing the story with a perspective that grounds the supernatural and genuine human emotion. Another reason to read The Shining is King's exceptional use of the Overlook Hotel as more than just a backdrop. It's an active, malevolent presence that manipulates the characters, turning the setting itself into one of the most memorable and terrifying elements in literature. The hotel's influence is woven so seamlessly into the story that it becomes an unforgettable entity. It reminds readers that some places carry echoes of the past that are impossible to ignore. If you love audiobooks, The Shining has several narrations that brings King's chilling prose to life, each adding a different dimension to the experience. Yet nothing compares to the immersive feeling of holding the book and feeling the tension seep through the pages as the story unfolds. King's writing has a way of creeping under your skin. His pacing and attention to character makes it impossible to look away as Jack unravels and the hotel's horror takes hold. The Shining is a masterpiece that reminds us why horror isn't just about jump scares and gore, it's about what lurks in the spaces between, the way our past can haunt us, and how our minds can be our own worst enemies. Now, whether you're a longtime King fan or new to his work, this is a book that will leave an indelible mark. It's an experience that encapsulates the very essence of psychological horror and showcases King's unparalleled storytelling prowess. For those who appreciate stories that stay with you long, long after you've turned the last page, The Shining is essential reading. So does The Shining deserve its reputation as one of King's best works? Without a doubt. This novel is a near perfect blend of psychological terror, supernatural manipulation, and raw human frailty. Revisiting this book after so many years has only deepened my appreciation for its complexity and the thematic richness. It's not just about the haunted corridors of the Overlook Hotel or the eerie manifestations that plague its halls. It's about the horror that lies dormant within us, the battles we wage against our inner demons, the echoes of trauma, and the way darkness can creep in and take hold when we are at our most vulnerable. King's depiction of Jack Torrance is central to what makes the story so compelling and so haunting. Upon rereading, it struck me just how sympathetic Jack truly is, despite how evil he is by the end of the novel. He's a victim of the hotel's influence. It just so happens that his selfishness, stubborn nature, and inability to reflect on his own actions set the stage for the Overlook's power to thrive. As for Stanley Kubrick's adaptation, my long-standing criticism remains. The movie portrays Jack as unhinged from the start, and it strips him of any chance to garner sympathy. It focuses primarily on his flaws without first establishing how the seeds of destruction were already planted within him at an early age. Of course, Kubrick's film also diverges in several significant ways, and there's no denying it lacks the emotional nuances that King so painstakingly built into his own narrative. The movie's iconic scenes, like the eerie twins at the end of the corridor and the river of blood flowing down the hallway, weren't part of the book, yet they've become synonymous with The Shining as a whole. These differences can be jarring, especially if you come to the film expecting a faithful adaptation. But with this reread, I found myself wanting to revisit the movie with new eyes, to appreciate it for what it is rather than lamenting on what it wasn't. There's value in seeing how different interpretations can highlight various facets of the same story. Ultimately, The Shining, both the film and the novel, is a masterpiece that stands the test of time because it goes beyond traditional horror. It's not just a ghost story. It's a portrait of human fragility, ambition, and the thin line between redemption and damnation. This book deserves to be read and reread and studied. It should be on every horror fan's bookshelf. Mine's right up there. Not just because it's terrifying, but because it's profoundly human. The themes of generational trauma, addiction, and the struggle for self-control are as resonant today as they were when King first penned them. There's very little to critique in the novel. Every sentence, every scene serves a purpose, building tension that pulls you through without a moment's drag. If I were to rate this, and I try to avoid star ratings, it would receive top marks across the board. The Shining is a book that I believe should be part of any serious reader's rotation, not only for its place in horror literature, but for the sheer mastery of storytelling that it represents. It's a novel that reveals more with each read, depending on where you are in life and what lens you bring to it. So that's my take, but now I want to hear from you. What did you think of The Shining? Whether you loved it or found it lacking, drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'm always curious to hear different perspectives, especially on a book as iconic as this one. And if you enjoyed this review, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow book lovers, and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and until next time, happy reading.